It was 7:30 in the evening, and the streets of Jaipur were alive with firecrackers, drums, and the scent of marigold. I had never seen so much color in one place: red, gold, saffron. The entire palette of India spilled into one night. I should have felt overwhelmed, but I was too distracted by the thought that I was about to marry a woman I barely knew. Her name was Anaya, and until a month ago, I had only seen her face in photographs her uncle had shown me. My colleagues had warned me that arranged marriages in India were complicated, that I was taking a risk. But something about those photographs, her quiet eyes, the way she seemed carved out of some timeless tradition, had silenced all my doubts. The wedding was a storm of rituals I barely understood. Priests chanting in Sanskrit, relatives circling us, throwing rice, tying threads around our wrists. I nodded when I was told to nod, bowed when I was told to bow. And all the while, Anaya sat beside me, her face hidden under a red veil embroidered with gold threads, silent as stone. When the fire was lit in the center of the mandap, the heat licked our faces, and the air was heavy with incense. My friends back home in New York would never believe this me, kneeling in front of a sacred fire, marrying a woman cloaked in red, while hundreds of strangers cheered. But it was what happened after the wedding that has kept me awake every night since. That night, the two of us were led into the bedroom prepared for the newlyweds. The walls were covered in garlands of jasmine, their scent cloying and sweet. The bed was enormous, draped with silk sheets. Candles flickered in brass holders, casting shadows that seemed to bend unnaturally long across the room. My heart pounded as I approached her, my wife, my stranger. I lifted the veil and froze. Her skin was pale, not the soft brown I'd glimpsed earlier, but chalk white, like the dust that clings to bones in a grave. Her lips were painted red, too red, like they were bleeding from within. And her eyes, my God, her eyes were wide, glassy, reflecting the flames of the candles, but empty, like she wasn't looking at me, but through me. She smiled faintly, and the corner of her lips twitched as though it hurt to move. I stumbled back. Anaya, my voice cracked. She tilted her head, the heavy jewelry in her hair jingling softly. Then she spoke for the first time, a whisper so thin it was almost drowned out by the rustle of jasmine petals falling from the ceiling. Do not open the door if you hear the anklets. I blinked. What? But she had already turned away, lying down on the bed as though nothing had happened. Her body moved with a strange stiffness, like each gesture was rehearsed. I stood there for a long time, watching her, the words repeating in my mind. Do not open the door if you hear the anklets. That night, I dreamt of bells, soft and metallic, echoing down a dark corridor. When I woke, the sound hadn't stopped. It was real. Tiny silver anklets, jingling outside our room, growing louder with each step. I sat up, my throat tight. The doorknob trembled as though someone was standing right outside, ready to come in. I turned to Anaya. She was lying beside me, utterly still, her chest barely rising. Her eyes were closed, but her ankles were bare. No anklets. The jingling grew sharper, circling the room like a predator, and then it stopped. Silence, except for my heart pounding so loud I thought it might wake her. I didn't move until dawn. When the first sunlight slipped through the curtains, I finally dared to breathe. But when I looked over at my wife again, my stomach twisted. because the sheets beneath her were damp, as though she had been crying salt water in her sleep. The first morning after the wedding, the jasmine garlands were still hanging, browned at the edges as though the night had been longer than it should have been. The air inside the Haveli felt heavy, like a hand pressing on my chest. Outside, Jaipur had already begun its daily chorus, vendors calling out for fresh vegetables, motorbikes coughing to life, temple bells chiming somewhere beyond the rooftops. Inside, the house seemed to swallow sound. Anaya moved quietly, as if she had been born in the corridors of this place. She did not look at me when she walked to the mirror, when she pinched a pinch of vermilion and drew a careful red line through the parting of her hair. The crimson looked perfect on her forehead, a sign that I was her husband. She did not say good morning, but she set a plate for me on the low table. Flatbread, yogurt, a small metal cup of masala chai that smelled of cardamom and ginger. Her hands were steady. If she noticed the strange dampness on the sheets from the night before, she gave no sign. "It is a beautiful house," I said, trying to tame my voice into something normal. "It has been here a long time," she replied. Not a smile, not a frown, just a fact laying carefully between us. The Haveli was a rectangle around a small inner courtyard where a neem tree grew out of a square of earth. Sunlight fell in a perfect square that inched along the tiles hour by hour. The hallways were lined with painted niches holding small brass lamps, each blackened by decades of flame. Above the main stairs, a mural depicted Shiva, his throat blue, a crescent moon in his hair. In another corridor, Kali danced with a necklace of skulls, her tongue a red blade. At the far end of the house, a narrow door stood recessed into the wall, hardly taller than my shoulder. Someone had hammered a small brass lock into the jamb, then removed it. Only the scar remained, a shiny crescent in old wood. When I moved toward that door, Anaya's voice floated from behind me, soft but absolute. "Do not open that one." "Why?" I turned. Her gaze, caught in the triangle of her veil, was unreadable. "It does not like to be opened." "It?" I asked. She did not answer. Later, a woman came to clear the breakfast plates. She was older, her hair streaked with white and pulled into a tight bun. Anklets glimmered at her ankles, not the heavy wedding kind, but thin bands that flashed with each step. She kept her eyes lowered, but when she glanced up, I saw the half-second of curiosity that people allow themselves when they look at a foreigner who is now family. "I am Kamla," she said. "If you need anything, call for me." She looked down the corridor, toward the recessed door, and made a small gesture with her hand that reminded me of a person brushing ash from a sleeve. It was almost nothing. Yet when she turned to go, she paused, as if remembering a rule. "Sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "at night, if you hear anklets that are not mine, please, keep your door closed." She folded her hands, the silver at her ankles giving a single, delicate chime, and left. I told myself it was a superstition. Every house has ghosts, if you count old stories and unmet promises. I tried to work that afternoon, to prepare for a call to my office in New York, scheduled for 4:30 p.m. Jaipur time. The Wi-Fi flickered. My laptop's cooling fan purred. Heat pooled under the ceiling. The air conditioner clanked and rattled before finally giving in with a sound like breath leaving a body. I decided to explore instead. The Haveli had the geometry of a mind that never forgot. Rooms unfolded into rooms, each holding something reluctantly. A trunk with brass corners, a wall clock stuck at 2:12, its minute hand trembling forward and backward, unable to decide. A framed photograph of a family, posed in stiff rows, the faces grayed with age, the eyes scratched out on two of them, not by accident, but by someone who had pressed the point over and over until the glass had buckled. In another room, a sewing machine faced the wall, as if ashamed. When I found the staircase that led down, I knew where it would end. Not a proper staircase, not centrally placed with a carved balustrade, but a slit in the floor near the recessed door, as if the house wished to keep the whole thing a secret. The steps were shallow, made of stone that had rounded under hundreds of cautious feet. A faint draft lifted the hair on my arms. It smelled like burned cotton. I stood at the top step and listened. Nothing. The hush of someone listening back. I went no further. At 6:15 p.m., as dusk cooled the courtyard, Anaya lit a brass lamp in the shrine room and rang a small bell 3 times. She began to sing. I did not know the words, but I could tell the song was a path with turns I could not see, a set of steps worn smooth by repetition. When she finished, the lamp flame leaned toward her like a creature seeking its keeper. She closed her eyes and pressed her hands together at her chest. In that moment, the house looked beautiful. Even the recessed door seemed like a calm mouth that would not speak unless spoken to. After dinner, Anaya stood by the window with her back to me. "Sometimes you will hear things," she said. "There are many old things here. Most will leave you alone if you leave them alone. What if they do not? Then we will be polite." "What does polite mean to the dead?" I asked, trying to smile. She did not. We went to bed early. At 10:40 p.m., the city had softened into a velvet hum. Crickets stitched a long seam through the stillness. The neem leaves rustled like paper pages, turned by a wind you could not feel. I lay awake, watching the pale spill of moonlight creep along the floor. Sometime after 1 a.m., I woke to the clink of metal on stone. A single step, then another, not a random jingle. Not the diffuse noise of jewelry in a drawer or wind-bothered chimes, but the measured conversation of anklets with a corridor. The sound came from far away at first, then inched closer with a merciless patience, as if whoever wore them had all the time in the world and had decided to spend it walking toward us. I did not move. My palms were damp. Anaya lay beside me, her breath slow, her body perfectly still. I leaned inches closer, squinting at her legs in the low light. Her ankles were bare again. No anklets. No rings of silver. No explanation. The anklets reached our door, where they stopped. Silence. Then, an almost playful scrape. Metal kissing wood. Something lifted the latch from the outside. The latch fell back into place without opening. Lifted again. Fell again. A test. A greeting. A suggestion. Do not open. Anaya said, her voice not above a breath, as if the words had been waiting at the base of her throat all night. My mouth was chalk dry. "Who is it?" Her answer came like a thought crossing a threshold. "It is the house," she said, and something the house remembers. The anklets moved on, a soft scolding laugh, sliding away down the corridor. I waited until the last thread of sound had dissolved. Only then did I let my body sink back onto the mattress. Sleep did not come. A few times, I felt the bed shift, as if someone had sat on the far edge for a moment and risen without leaving a mark. Just before dawn, the faintest drizzle tapped the courtyard tiles, though the sky was a clear sheet of black blue. I got up and crossed the room. The door was warm under my palm, as if someone who radiated heat had leaned against it from the other side. When morning bled into the courtyard, I opened our door and stepped out. The corridor smelled faintly of incense and something else, like sari silk that had been singed. On the floor, a trail of marigold petals led away from our room. Each petal had a soot rim, as if it had been lifted through smoke. Kamla found me there, staring down, my hands useless at my sides. She set a brass tray on the ground with tea and 2 small cups. "Sometimes," she said, "festival flowers from years ago get confused and come back. They do not mean harm." "Is that what you call harm here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Confused flowers and guests who test the latch in the middle of the night." Kamla's eyes flicked to the recessed door. "Sir, it is an old house. It will test you the way an old teacher tests a new student." "And that door?" I asked. "Who lives there?" "No one," she said too quickly. Then she softened. "Sir, there are places in every house that belong to its memory, not to us. That door remembers a night when too many bells were rung." "Whose bells?" Kamla hesitated. She picked up a marigold petal, turned it once between her fingers, and set it back like a coin she had decided not to spend. "You are master here," she said, "but the house does not know you yet. For some time, let it think you are a guest. Guests do not go everywhere." I wanted to say that it was my house too, that my name was now painted on the door jamb with vermilion, as surely as Anaya's was. Instead, I nodded because the cool logic of fear had already done its arithmetic. I would not go down those shallow steps today. That afternoon, the heat stepped into the rooms and sat like a patient relative. A dust storm moved along the city's edge. A brown wall far off like a thought you did not want to think. I found the family room where sunlight pooled near an old trunk. The trunk was painted with a peacock whose eye had been smudged into a dark star. Inside lay cloth bundles tied with cotton string. I undid one. A bridal sari slid into my hands with a whisper. Red turned darker in the shadows of its folds, a red that suggested pressure and heat. Near the hem, the silk had bubbled and hardened into small translucent blisters. A faint black soot laced the border. When I lifted it to my face, a breath of smoke brushed my cheek. Not stale, not trapped, but fresh, as if somewhere, at that exact moment, something had flamed and gone out. "Do not touch that." Anaya's voice behind me, close enough that I felt it like a draft. I turned. "Is this yours?" Her eyes moved to the sari with a tenderness that made me feel suddenly, horribly, like an intruder. "It was someone's," she said. "The house likes to keep what is left behind." What was left behind? She came forward and took the sari from my hands. Careful, almost reverent, though her fingers flinched when they brushed the bubbled edge. "Sometimes a ceremony begins and does not finish," she said. "When that happens, the things that were supposed to witness it refuse to leave. They stay until someone tells them the last line of the prayer." "What is the last line?" She folded the sari into itself, smaller and smaller, as if she could convince it to be a secret again. You will know it when it is time. That night, I tried to convince myself that knowledge was comfort, that a story, even an awful one, must obey some rule. I could not find the rule. At 11:20 p.m., a neighbor's radio played a faint melody that drifted across the rooftops. At 12:07 a.m., the temple bell struck, a single note that hung like a question. At 12:40 a.m., somewhere in the Haveli, a wooden thing sighed under the weight of an invisible body. At 1:30 a.m., the anklets returned. This time, they did not move toward our door. They circled the inner courtyard, paused under our window, and waited. I could hear the silver beads breathing. I could hear the hush of a sorry, barely brushing stone. I could hear, in the way one hears with the bones and not the ears, a voice that was not a voice saying, "Come, do not go," Anaya said. Though I had not moved, "What will happen if I step outside? The house will believe you are ready." For what? For the next part. I lay there, rigid with the carefulness that terror teaches. The anklets did not grow impatient. They made one small sound, a half laugh, and then drifted away toward the recessed door, where they stopped like a breath held inside a chest that refused to rise or fall. I wanted to ask Anaya 100 questions. About the sorry, about the door, about the way her words fit these nights too precisely to be guesses. But as I turned, I saw, in the cold blue wash of moonlight, that the vermilion line in her hair had smeared to the side, as if something had slipped its thumb along her scalp while she slept. Her face had relaxed into a softness that did not look like rest. It looked like surrender. Before dawn, I dreamed of a corridor paved with marigolds, their petals black-edged and hot to the touch. A woman walked ahead of me, her anklets announcing every step. But when I reached for her hand, my fingers closed on smoke. I woke with my mouth full of the taste of ash. When the first mynas began their morning arguments in the neem tree, I rose and stepped into the hallway. A fine gray dust had written a half ring on the floor outside the recessed door, as if the hem of a heavy sari had drawn a circle there and then vanished into itself. Kamla arrived with tea at 6:10 a.m. and saw the ring at once. She looked old in that moment, older than the house, older than the quiet that attended her footsteps. "Sir," she whispered, "today you should not go anywhere far. The house will ask you to listen." To what? To what it is ready to say. I wanted to laugh, to reject the sentence like a ridiculous errand. Instead, I put my hands around the hot cup and waited for my fingers to stop shaking. In the courtyard, the square of sunlight had begun its daily walk. Somewhere, a bell answered. Another bell. The day had put on its ordinary clothes, and yet I knew that ordinary was a costume that would not fit for long. When Anaya emerged from the shrine room, the little lamp flame followed her like a pet, and for the first time I wondered if the red in her hair kept me safe, or marked me for attention. "Today," she said, "we will visit an old woman 2 streets away. She likes to talk. She will tell you the house's middle, if not its beginning or its end." "What middle?" "The night of the bells," she said. "The one the house remembered." She adjusted her veil, and the tiniest sound came from her wrist bangles. Not quite a chime, not quite a sigh. It felt like a promise, or a warning, or both. I followed her through the corridor, past the recessed door that now seemed to have grown an inch taller in the night. As we stepped out into the street, I caught one last thing. The small brass bell in the shrine room moved an inch from where it had been the evening before, as if a hand had taken it up in the dark and rung it once, very politely. To mark the passing of an hour no clock would claim, the streets of Jaipur at 9:30 in the morning are a theater of noise. Vendors crying out for vegetables, horns blaring, the clatter of rickshaws, the smell of frying pakoras mingling with cow dung and incense. But walking beside Anaya, I felt as though the sound dimmed just before it reached us, like we carried a bubble of silence. She didn't hold my hand. She didn't speak, but she walked with a certainty, her sari brushing dust into small storms at her feet. People looked at her, then at me, and looked away too quickly. We turned into a narrow lane where the sunlight was cut into ribbons by hanging clotheslines. At the end stood a house no bigger than a stall. Its door was painted blue once, now faded to the color of river stones. Inside, the old woman sat cross-legged on a charpoy, her hair white as dried jasmine, her eyes bright and sharp like river glass. The room smelled of turmeric and smoke. A small shrine glowed in one corner, where an oil lamp burned steadily, as if wind had never dared touch it. She looked at me for a long time before she spoke. "So, you are the one who has married her." I started to nod, but Anaya cut in softly. "He must know what the house remembers." The old woman's gaze returned to me. "You sleep in the room near the recessed door." "Yes." My voice felt small in that space. Her lips pressed together until the wrinkles deepened like cracks in dry earth. Then she began, 30 years ago, that Haveli belonged to the Mehra family. They were wealthy merchants, proud of their lineage. They arranged a marriage for their daughter, Leela, a girl as beautiful as she was obedient. On her wedding day, she wore a sari red as blood, embroidered with gold, anklets of pure silver on her feet. The rituals began at sunset. The drums thundered, the priests chanted, the fire burned bright. But before the last mantra was spoken, before the marriage could be sealed, something happened. No one agrees on what it was. Some say the groom's family mocked the dowry. Others say a shadow passed across the flame, and the priests went silent. But what all remember is this: the bride vanished from the mandap. The old woman's voice lowered. They found her in the Haveli's lower room, the one you are not to open. She was still in her sari, still wearing the anklets, but she was burned, not by firewood, not by lamps, by something that had no source but still left ash. The ceremony unfinished. The bride's soul refused to leave. She remained walking the halls, waiting for the last prayer to be spoken. I felt the hairs on my arms stand. "So you believe she's still there?" The old woman's laugh was soft, pitying. "Believe. I have heard her myself at night. Anklets in the corridor. I lived next door then. We all heard her. And every man who tried to stay in that house after, every groom they forced upon her in secret, did not last. They either fled in madness, or the house made them disappear." I swallowed. "Disappear how?" Her eyes pinned me. "Ask your wife." Anaya stood very still, her hands folded before her. She did not look away, did not deny it. "She chooses who will stay," the old woman said finally. "The house does not act alone. It listens to her." Anaya turned to me, then, her face calm, but her voice a thread pulled taut. "It is enough for today. Let us go." We left in silence. The street seemed louder again, but every sound pressed against me like a weight. When we returned, the Haveli waited with its painted gods and listening shadows. As I stepped into the courtyard, the neem leaves stirred though no wind passed, and from the recessed door came a faint chime, delicate, like someone testing anklets they hadn't worn in years. Kamla appeared, carrying a brass plate. She looked at me, then at Anaya, then quickly down. "Sir," she murmured. "Did she tell you the story?" "Yes," I said. "Then you know now. It is not about ghosts. It is about promises left unfinished." Anaya's gaze cut across her like a blade. Kamla fell silent and hurried away. That night, I couldn't eat. The lentils tasted of smoke. The rice clung to my tongue like ash. At 11:50 p.m., as the lamps guttered in the corridors, the anklets began again, louder this time, impatient, circling. Anaya lay beside me, eyes open in the dark. "Do not rise," she whispered. "But do not rise." The anklets stopped outside the recessed door. A knock followed, 3 times, slow, hollow. The old woman's words throbbed in my mind. She was burned before the last mantra. I realized then I was not just married to Anaya. I was inside a wedding that had never ended, and the bride was still waiting. The recessed door stared at me every day. It wasn't large, wasn't grand, just a wooden frame tucked into shadow, scarred where a lock had once been. But after the old woman's story, I could not pass it without feeling the air turn colder, heavier, like water thickening around me. By 3 in the afternoon, when the heat pressed against the house like an iron lid, I found myself standing before it. The house was silent, almost expectant. I told myself I was only curious, that I had lived in New York apartments, walked through abandoned subway stations, visited ruined castles in Europe. Nothing had shaken me. This was just a door, nothing more. I pressed my palm against the wood. It was warm, as though someone had leaned against it moments before. The latch lifted without resistance. The door groaned open, and a smell breathed out. Old incense, burned fabric, and something like rainwater trapped in stone. The staircase descended in shallow steps, each rounded by time. A single oil lamp flickered on the wall, though no one had lit it. I felt the draft crawl up my neck as I went down, step by step, into the belly of the house. The lower room was small, square, carved from stone. The ceiling was blackened, the walls scarred by smoke. In the center stood a low platform covered in cracked marble. Upon it rested a photograph in a brass frame, its glass stained with soot. I wiped it with my sleeve. My hand trembled. It was a wedding portrait, a bride in vermilion sari, anklets shining, henna staining her hands. Her face was serene, eyes lowered, lips curved in the faint smile of ritual modesty. Beside her stood a groom, blurred at the edges, as if time had refused to keep his image. But it was the bride's face that hollowed my chest. She looked exactly like Anaya. My breath stuttered. I stepped back, knocking over a small metal bowl that clattered across the floor. The sound woke something in the walls. The air trembled with a long, low sigh. The flame of the lamp bent toward me, thin as a tongue. Then I heard it, the delicate chime of anklets, not from the corridor above, but here, in the room, circling me, though I saw nothing. Who's there? My voice cracked, swallowed by the stone. The anklets stopped behind me. When I turned, she was there. A bride in a half-burned sari, the fabric blistered and blackened at the hem, her veil torn and reeking of smoke. Her skin was pale as chalk, cracked at the edges as though heat had split it, and her eyes empty pools, rimmed in kohl that ran like tears. She lifted her head, and the silver bells on her ankles gave a single, sharp chime. "You are late," she whispered, voice like ash scattering. I stumbled backward. My heel struck the platform. The photograph rattled. The bride glided closer, her bare feet leaving faint smears of soot on the floor. "You must finish what was left undone," she said. "Only then will the fire rest." Her hand reached for mine, thin and trembling, the bangles on her wrist clinking like tiny chains. Before her fingers touched me, another voice cut through the room sharp, commanding, "Enough." It was Anaya. She stood at the foot of the stairs, her veil drawn back, her eyes glinting like steel. The burned bride recoiled, hissing, her form flickering like smoke. "This is not your night," Anaya said, her voice steady, her body rigid with something I could not name. The apparition lingered a moment longer, her anklets ringing with defiance. Then she faded, dissolving into the shadows, leaving only the smell of charred silk. I gasped, my knees weak. What was that? Who was she? Anaya came to me, her hand brushing my arm. "Cold as river water. The house keeps its memory. You have seen it now. That is enough." "No," I said, my voice rising. "That was a person. She looked like you." "Why does she look like you?" Her eyes lowered, veiled not by fabric, but by silence. Some faces repeat, some lives echo. You should not look for reasons where the house has only rules. But she spoke to me. She said I was late. Late for what? Anaya's lips parted, but no answer came. Instead, she led me up the stairs, her grip firm, as though she were afraid I would be pulled back down. When we reached our room, she closed the door and bolted it. That night, long after she fell into her strange, motionless sleep, I lay awake. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the burned sari, the anklets, the face that mirrored my wife's, and somewhere in the dark, faint but insistent, I heard anklets tracing the same circle in the lower room, waiting. The days after my descent blurred into each other, but the nights sharpened like knives. Every sunset seemed to signal a rehearsal, as though the house itself was preparing me for something. The anklets never stopped. Some nights they circled the courtyard. Some nights they paused at our door. And once, I swear, I heard them ring directly at the side of the bed, inches from my face. By 9 p.m. one evening, I could no longer bear the silence. "Anaya," I said, my voice cracking in the dim lamplight. "You have to tell me the truth. Who was she? Why does she look like you?" Anaya sat at the mirror, combing her long black hair, the teeth of the comb catching on invisible tangles. She did not meet my eyes. She was promised a life she never lived. She said, a prayer she never heard to the end. Such things echo. They do not fade. That is not an answer. She turned then, her eyes calm, too calm. She wants what was denied. The last part of the ceremony, the fire, the words, the 7 steps. My mouth went dry. "You mean she wants a wedding?" Anaya nodded. and she has chosen you. That night, the house gave up all pretense of peace. At 11:45 p.m., the anklets began again, louder than ever, every chime snapping through the corridors like sparks. The recessed door swung open by itself, its wood creaking in protest. From below, light flickered, though no lamp had been lit. Anaya rose from the bed, wrapped her sari around her shoulders, and looked at me. "Come," she said simply. I should have refused, should have run, but something stronger than reason pulled me to my feet. My legs carried me to the staircase, my breath shallow and quick. We descended together, the air thickening with each step. The lower room had changed. Where once there had been only smoke-stained stone, now a mandap had appeared, its pillars draped in faded marigold garlands. In the center, a sacred fire burned, though no wood fed it, just flame rising from a circle of blackened ash. And across from me stood the bride in vermilion. Her sari was whole again, crimson and gold, though smoke still curled faintly from its hem. Her anklets shone, each step chiming like a verdict. She lowered her eyes, then lifted them to mine with a smile too sharp to be human. "Sit," she said, her voice thin as breath through reeds. "The fire waits." I looked to Anaya, but she stood frozen, her hands folded, her expression unreadable. The bride moved closer, her bangles clinking like chains. 7 steps, 7 promises, she whispered. "Once they are spoken, I will rest." She reached for my hand. Her skin was cold, damp, like cloth dipped in river water. The fire roared higher as her fingers brushed mine. "Stop." I yanked my hand back, my chest heaving. "I'm not part of this. I don't belong to you." The bride's face contorted, lips peeling back to reveal teeth too sharp, too many. The fire spat embers against the stone. "You will finish what was left undone," she hissed, "or you will burn where I burned." The anklets thundered now, echoing from every wall, every corner, as though 100 brides marched in circles around me. I stumbled back toward the stairs, but the door above slammed shut with a deafening crash. There was no escape. Anaya stepped forward at last, her voice steady but strained. "He is not yours." The burned bride's eyes narrowed. "Then why does he carry the mark?" "What mark?" I gasped. The bride pointed at my forehead. I reached up, my fingers coming away stained red. Vermilion. Anaya had placed it there that morning, in a ritual I hadn't understood. A mark of marriage, a tether. The bride's smile widened. "You are already bound." The fire blazed higher, and in its light, I saw not one bride, but many faces flickering in the smoke. Veils torn, eyes hollow, anklets jangling in an endless dirge. The air grew hotter. The floor beneath me trembled. Anaya grabbed my arm. "Run when I tell you." "What about you?" Her grip tightened, nails biting into my skin. "Do not look back. No matter what you hear, do not look back." The fire shrieked like a living thing. The bride surged forward, anklets clashing in a storm of silver. Anaya pushed me toward the stairs. "Go." I ran, the sound of bells chasing me, clawing at my heels. Behind me, Anaya's voice rose in a chant I didn't recognize, words in Sanskrit that burned the air. I did not look back. I couldn't. When I reached our room and slammed the door, the anklets fell silent. But I knew the ceremony wasn't over. It had only just begun. The next morning, the Haveli looked deceptively ordinary. Sunlight, carved its perfect square across the courtyard tiles. Kamla swept the neem leaves into a neat pile, humming a folk tune under her breath. The brass lamp sat empty, cold, but inside me, nothing was ordinary. My chest still carried the echo of bells. My skin still crawled from the cold touch of her hand and the mark. I had scrubbed my forehead raw at 7 in the morning, splashing water again and again. But no matter how hard I rubbed, the faint smear of vermilion returned, as though my skin itself exhaled the color. Anaya watched me in silence. She sat by the window, her sari catching the sunlight like a flame wrapped in silk. Her face was serene, but her eyes followed me like shadows. Why me? I asked at last. Out of all the men who've lived in this house, why me? She did not answer immediately. Her hands folded in her lap, fingers tightening as though she were braiding invisible threads. Because you married me, she said. That doesn't make sense. It makes all the sense, she replied softly. You married into the house. The house remembers its unfinished bride. And because you are bound to me, you are bound to her. I stared. Then who are you? Anaya. Tell me the truth. Are you her? Her eyes flickered, the faintest break in her calm. I am not her, but you wear the same face. Some faces repeat, she whispered. Some lives circle back until the circle is closed. At noon, the heat drove me into the cool of the inner corridor. My mind kept replaying the old woman's words. She chooses who will stay. Kamla passed by, balancing a tray of rice and dal. She paused, her eyes darting to either side, then leaned close. You must be careful. Sahib, she whispered. The house has 2 brides now. What do you mean? I asked. One of flesh, one of ash, one tied to you by life, one tied by fire. Neither will let go. I caught her wrist. Then tell me what happened to the men before me, the grooms who tried. Her lips trembled. Some fled in madness. Some were pulled into the fire. And one was never found. Only his anklets remained, though men do not wear anklets. Before I could press her further, she pulled away, muttering prayers, disappearing into the kitchen. That night, the air itself turned into a ritual. At 10:30 p.m., lamps lit themselves in the corridors, one by one, without hands. At 11, garlands of marigold fresh, though no one had strung them, hung across the doorways. Their scent was cloying, nauseating. By midnight, the anklets began again. But this time, there were 2 sets, one loud, defiant, ringing from below, another soft, delicate. Pacing outside our room, Anaya stood, pulling her veil low. She is calling. The recessed door swung open. Smoke drifted up like a bridal veil made of ash. I shook my head. I'm not going down there again. You must, Anaya said. If you don't, she will come here, and this room will burn. We descended together. The lower room was alive now, draped in impossible colors, alive with chanting voices that had no bodies. The fire roared. The mandap gleamed with gold that melted and reformed as I looked at it. And she stood there, the burned bride, now whole again, her anklets bright, her sari untouched by flame. She smiled when she saw me. Come, she beckoned. Take the 7 steps with me. Anaya moved in front of me, her arms outstretched like a shield. He is mine. The burned bride's smile curdled. Yours. You are nothing but a mask. A shadow stitched from my face. You were given his hand only because I was denied it. I froze. What is she saying? Anaya's voice was taut. Do not listen. But the bride in vermilion stepped closer, her anklets striking like hammers. She is no wife. She is my echo, my replacement. Do you not see it? She wears me like a sari, and you call her your. I looked at Anaya. Her face was pale, her silence heavy. The fire leapt, embers spiraling. The chanting grew louder, circling us. The air between the two women pulsed, as if the house itself waited for me to decide. Choose. The burned bride hissed. The living mask or the bride who waits? Anaya's eyes finally met mine. Wide, desperate, pleading for something she would not name. And in that moment, I understood. I was not caught between a wife and a ghost. I was caught between two wives. The Haveli did not sleep that night. It breathed. The walls groaned like old lungs. The neem tree shivered, though there was no wind. And the lamps burned with flames too tall, too blue, as if fed by something other than oil. At 1:15 in the morning, the anklets began again. Not one set, not two. Dozens, hundreds, the entire house filled with a metallic storm, as though an unseen procession of brides marched in circles, every step demanding the same thing: completion. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the sound crawled inside me, rattling my teeth, echoing in my ribs. Anaya stood in the center of the room, her veil loose, her eyes glimmering like coals. It is time, she said. I'm not going down there again. You will, or she will come here. And when she does, even the walls will burn. The recessed door had opened by itself. Smoke rolled up the stairs, carrying the scent of charred silk and flowers. I felt my body move, against all reason, against all will, as though invisible hands had taken my shoulders and steered me forward. The lower room had transformed completely. The mandap was bright with fresh garlands. The fire roared in a pit of ash, and the chanting voices were clear now. Men's voices, priests long dead, intoning the words of a wedding unfinished. And she was waiting. The bride in vermilion stood across the fire, her sari glowing like fresh blood. Her eyes locked on mine. She smiled, the kind of smile that split the air. You are here, she whispered. At last, she beckoned, and I stepped forward before I realized I had moved. The fire spat sparks that didn't burn, but clung like insects to my skin. 7 steps, she said. 7 vows. Then you are mine, and I will rest. She extended her hand. I saw the bangles, silver and red, clinking softly. My throat closed. Behind me, Anaya's voice cut through the chant. No, the bride's smile curdled. He carries my mark. He is bound. Anaya's eyes flashed. He is my husband, not yours. The chanting grew louder, drowning my thoughts. I felt the weight of 2 gazes pressing me toward fire. The bride reached for me again. Say the vows. Anaya stepped between us, her hand gripping mine. If you speak them, you will never leave this house. You will burn with her. Do you hear me? You will burn. The fire leapt, higher than both of them, and from the smoke erupted faces dozens of brides, veils torn, eyes hollow, anklets chiming in unison. Finish what we began, they whispered. Finish the 7 steps. I couldn't breathe. My chest hammered like a drum. What happens if I refuse? I shouted over the roar. The burned bride's eyes darkened, black swallowing the whites. Then the house takes you anyway. The floor trembled. The mandap tilted. The ash pit flared with hands reaching up. Skeletal, clawing for my legs. Anaya clung to me, her voice desperate now. Do not say the vows. Whatever happens, do not let her trick you. The bride hissed, her anklets clashing like swords. He is already mine. The vermilion marked him. He belongs to the fire. I looked from one to the other. The woman of flesh, the woman of ash, both bound to me, both demanding. And the fire roared like it was laughing, waiting for me to speak. The fire howled like a living beast. Shadows of 100 brides spun around us, their anklets clashing in a storm of silver and bone. Smoke coiled into faces, eyes gouged, mouths open, veils aflame. At 1:40 a.m., the mandap shook, the garlands of marigold withering to black petals that fell and sizzled in the ash. The priests' voices grew clearer, chanting the lines of vows I could not understand, but somehow felt carved into my marrow. The bride in vermilion raised her hand, palm outstretched toward me. Take the steps, she commanded. Speak the promises. End what was denied. Her voice was a thread tightening around my throat. My legs moved forward, almost without my consent, until the fire's heat licked my face. Anaya gripped my arm hard enough to bruise. If you speak a single vow, you will not belong to the living. She will have you. The bride's smile widened, her teeth glinting like broken glass. And if he refuses, the house will eat him whole. The chanting shifted. A priest's disembodied voice intoned, Step 1. Honor the bond of husband and wife. The bride pulled me closer. Her anklets rang. My mouth trembled open, the words almost spilling out. Anaya cried, No, and pressed her vermilion-marked forehead against mine. Listen to me. You are bound to me, not to her. Choose me, or neither of us will escape. The fire shrieked, flaring higher, as if impatient. Step 2. Protect one another against harm. The smoke swirled, shaping into skeletal hands clutching at my ankles. Heat singed my skin. The bride's eyes bored into mine. Black voids. Bottomless. Say it, she whispered, or you will never wake again. And then I understood. The vows were not promises to her. They were promises to the fire. Each step was not about union. It was about surrender. If I gave one vow, I would belong to the house forever. I clenched my fists. My voice cracked against the roar. I will not say them. The bride's scream split the air, high and inhuman. The anklets around us exploded into a frenzy, the floor buckling beneath my feet. Anaya pulled me back, shouting a mantra, her voice slicing through the chaos. Her vermilion smeared across my forehead, burning like flame, but shielding me from the hands clawing upward. The bride lunged, her veil aflame, her teeth bared. You were mine before you were hers. I shouted back. No, I am not yours. Not now, not ever. The fire erupted, a column of red and black, engulfing the mandap. The bride's voices shrieked in unison, their anklets clattering into silence as one by one they collapsed into ash. The burned bride staggered, her form flickering, unraveling into smoke. You will never be free, she hissed. Her body crumbled, her anklets falling to the stone with a final, hollow chime. Then she was gone. The mandap collapsed. The flames guttered, The room fell into silence so complete it felt like the world itself had stopped breathing. When I opened my eyes, I was back in our room, the sheets damp with sweat. The recessed door was closed, the corridor quiet. Anaya sat beside me, her hand in mine. "It is finished," she said, but her voice was heavy, her face pale. For now, I looked down at my palm, faint and red, like blood seared into skin, was the shape of a circle, the mark of the 7 steps, and in the silence of the Haveli, so faint it could have been imagination, I heard it. One single anklet chime. Waiting. It has been 3 weeks since that night. 3 weeks since the fire swallowed itself. Since the anklets scattered into silence. Since I thought the house had finally let me go. But silence is never freedom. Silence is only the breath a predator takes before it strikes again. By day, the Haveli looks normal. Kamla sweeps the courtyard. Neighbors pass in the lanes, calling greetings. Anaya sits by the shrine, her lips moving in prayers I do not recognize. The neem tree bends its shadow across the tiles. But by night, the house still listens. Sometimes I wake at 2:15 a.m. and feel the sheets damp again. The same salt water that soaked them the night of our wedding. Sometimes I hear a single anklet chime, not moving, not circling, just waiting. And Anaya, I watch her as she sleeps beside me, perfectly still, her chest rising but too slowly, as though she were practicing the imitation of breath. Some mornings, the vermilion in her hair is fresh, though she has not touched the pot. Some evenings, when the lamplight falls across her face, I see a flicker, another smile, another pair of eyes, layered beneath her own. I ask myself, did I really choose? Or did I only delay? Last night, I dreamt of the 7 steps again. This time, I was not in the Haveli. I was back in New York, standing on a city sidewalk, but the pavement beneath my feet was ash. And when I looked down, vermilion marked my forehead. The traffic roared. People hurried by, but every step they took echoed with silver bells. I woke gasping, my hand on my chest. The circle-shaped burn still there. The fire is not finished with me, and so I speak this aloud now, not as a story, not as superstition, but as confession. If you ever find yourself in a Haveli in Jaipur, if you ever marry into a house that warns you not to open a door, do not listen to curiosity, do not believe in safety, because the house remembers, the bride remembers, and when the anklets ring outside your door, no matter how long you stay silent, sooner or later, you will have to answer. A single chime echoes in the distance. The story ends.